I want to defend The Last of Us. They've been killing The Last of Us everywhere I see, every podcast I listen to, every YouTube video I watch. Moist Critical, who, to be fair, has never had an original thought in his life, is shitting on it. I want to defend The Last of Us. And I want to talk to somebody who hates The Last of Us Season 2 about it. So Zay, if you can get on the Discord, how do I begin this? You tell me, I guess in a nutshell, what your thoughts were on Season 2 of The Last of Us.
I went through like a range of emotions because like a lot of the people that are criticizing The Last of Us Part 2 are like pure dickheads. You know what I mean? They just hate the way that Bella Ramsey looks. You know, so they start hating on The Last of Us. They want their Ellie to be sexy. That's not really where my frustrations. That's not really where my frustrations come from. My frustrations more so come with I feel I have a problem with Ellie not being competent and not being able to do anything. Throughout the whole season, we're constantly shown that Ellie is kind of a child and that she's reckless. And I don't think that's like proper characterization for Ellie because it kind of dampens down like the themes of the story. And niggas gonna say, oh, you comparing it to the game too much, but like, nigga, in the game, I know they can't, adapt everything from the show, but in the game, Ellie was absolutely like, you felt the weight that she was like a badass. You know what I mean? You felt that she could handle herself. But in the show, it's kind of like she's always getting saved by like men. She's always getting saved. I don't know. I just didn't like that aspect of the show. I also feel like too many times they kind of told us like Abby's backstory, and I was never with that because I feel like if you learn Abby's backstory over the course of like getting to know her as a character, it has more weight and impact. I feel like they should have saved why what happened until season 3. That's more so basically why I had problems with The Last of Us, but I still enjoyed it because they had a great cast. Bella Ramsey was great. Feel me? Isabella Merced, I feel like she was the standout of the season. I loved her. And then, obviously Pedro Pascal was great. So the cast was great. So I still enjoyed the show from week to week, but it's worse than the game for sure.
Okay.
That's how I feel.
Okay. I'm glad everything you said is I think I'm glad you laid out your problems with it because this is where the defense comes in about this show. So first of all, we have to establish that the game in the show are not the same thing. And here's what I'll say, like, I understand gamers' frustrations because the show is clearly going in its own direction, and I want to talk about that direction. And I want us to look at what the show is actually trying to do with Ellie as a character that is very different from the game. We're going to talk about that. But I understand the frustration if you're a gamer because it's not even the fact that it's diverging from what Ellie was in the game, which I can understand if you got an attachment to her. They are trying to have their cake and eat it too, because they're trying to tell their own story with Ellie, but they're still including all the pivotal moments from the game, if that makes sense. So these two things don't make sense. You can't try to keep some sort of fidelity of what the game is with basically like every big plot point they've kept down to like obviously the thing with Joel in episode 2. How early it happens in the season, the way this season breaks. A lot of it's similar to the structure of the game, and I think they're trying to maintain, keep it faithful to what the game is to keep the gamers happy. But that falls apart if you fundamentally change who Ellie is. So, and they have. I think there's no doubt. This is like, you can't argue that they've changed who Ellie is as a character. Now, that being said, I do think what they're doing with Ellie is actually interesting, and I think we should like look at it more closely. I think what they're doing is showing us the gap in part 1 Ellie and part 2 Ellie. Because part 1 Ellie is a little kid, obviously. Part 2 Ellie is a mature, grown badass. We don't see the transformation from little girl Ellie to like part 2 Ellie. Realistically, we jump. We don't see that. I think what the show is trying to do is actually show us the middle years in between the little kid and the adult. And so we're seeing a completely different type of Ellie, of like in this weird middle ground of like, she's not quite the young Ellie, but she's not quite like the badass, like, can do it all Ellie. So I think that's where I thought about it when I was watching this season. I'm like, this is so different from like the game. What are they trying to do? And then I realized maybe they're just trying to create a more subtle and like long-term development of the character of Ellie. I do think by the end of the show, I I think we're gonna see the Ellie from the game, or from part 2, if that makes sense. Like the badass. But I think they're taking the time from doing it. I figured as much when I saw the headline that there might be a season 4. And I'm like, that feels like dragging out part 2 a lot. Like 3 seasons for part 2 seems like really dragging it out. But then I thought in terms of the actual show, when you look at it as its own thing, that would probably make for a great arc for Ellie. From going little girl Ellie, the middle years of her being kind of thinking she's grown, but clearly not. It keeps getting saved, and it's not. It's kind of, it taking like autonomy in her decisions, but it's not quite like, there's an awkwardness that I think we're seeing. That I think we're gonna see in the middle seasons, and then by the 4th season, I think what they're gonna show is that Ellie that gamers are familiar with. So I think that's what's happening. And another point I wanted to talk about is what you said about Ellie's much more competent. There's another difference between a game and a show. In a game, you're playing as Ellie and you're killing thousands of people. You are going around murdering thousands of humans. You are a psychopath serial killer in the game, but that's fun in the context of a game. When you put that in a show, you can't have Ellie just kill everybody to show whether she is competent or not. So what the show has decided is that, in the show, she doesn't have that much experience. So it's unrealistic that Ellie will be the badass if, as we saw in the flashbacks in episode 6, Ellie doesn't go on patrol until she's 19. She don't even leave the compound until she's 19. She doesn't see the outside world. She's in Jackson. She hasn't killed anybody. She doesn't have that much experience. Now that she's out of Jackson and is on her own, clearly we're seeing her try to defend herself, and it's, she's failing miserably. She keeps getting saved over and over again, but within the context of the show, I think that makes sense. So I think this is why I think there is a defense to be had about season 2 of The Last of Us. I think people are comparing it to the game, not unfairly, because season 1 was exactly like the game pretty much, besides an episode or 2 where they would add certain things, or maybe a certain cold open here or there. But for the most part, season 1 was pretty much exactly the same. But I think they realized they cannot do the same strategy for season 2 or for part 2 of the game. And I think that's where the disconnect is. So I think this is Lou says she did kill someone. Yeah, one person. Not 1,000 people. Regardless of it's single. It's in one hand the amount of people she's killed. What do you have to say about that?
I think that okay, so I agree with you, and I also address that the fact that you cannot adapt everything from the game. And I was actually on their side when they skipped Hillcrest, and then they skipped the fool they skipped the school part, which is valid. I understand, skipping some of those moments in the game where so that way you can just get into the day 1, day 2, day 3 stuff. But over the course of the show, they always have Ellie paired with somebody, and we barely get to see Ellie kind of develop solo. The only times we see Ellie solo is when she's dealing with the stalker. She kills Nora, and then she goes into the aquarium. I think those are the only times if there's any other times, let me know. But I think those are the only times over the course of the season that we see Ellie solo. And I think that you don't always have to have a character develop through talking with other characters. I do think you can have times where a character is doing things in action, and then we get to see them learn stuff through that action, kind of like John Wick a little bit. She doesn't have to be John Wick. I'm not saying that. That's a little bit too far. But you can you can develop a story through action scenes with no dialogue. That's very possible. We've seen it before. It's not the first time shit like that has been done. I don't know. I just feel like they could have gave us more solo Ellie, which would have solved my problem a little bit more. And also they also write her to be she's kind of very empathetic towards every single time we see her do something bad, she's oh, I'm so sorry.
Right.
In the game, she's more so fuck that.
Well, yeah,
I'm trying to get my job done. I'm trying to get the shit done, which is I guess they wanted to make her more likable for audiences, but I think the likable thing about Ellie in the game is the fact that she's not likable until the end.
Right. Okay. I mean, yeah, I see what you're saying. They definitely go in their own direction with Ellie, but I think it's not even just the her remorse for a lot of the things she's doing. I don't even think it's necessarily like to make her likable. I think it's pure. It's she's young in the show. I think we gotta accept this is not mature adult Ellie yet. My theory is that we will get there, but she's just not that. So like this 19-year-old who was sheltered, well, not sheltered most of her life, but in Jackson grew a sense of like, she wasn't doing shit in Jackson. I think, and now going out of her comfort zone. And if you think about in the context of the show, when she like the torturing of Nora or the killing of Owen and Mel, those are like she hasn't like she would feel bad. We got to look at it within the context of the show they're doing. Like that Ellie would feel bad, and I know it's hard for people to separate it from game Ellie. I understand it's impossible. People like that character too much, but I think we got to see what the actual show is doing and how within that show. Everything to do with Ellie does make sense. But again, I already fessed up to the fact that you can't do that, but also have the same moments from the game, right? Because they're trying to do those same moments, but with a different character, essentially.
Yeah, I think unfortunately for me, they kind of episode 6 was very good until like they tried to like mash together 2 moments from the game, which kind of like ruined it a little bit for me. They mashed together the porch scene. They put that in like a little early.
Yeah.
And then they put in the scene where Ellie goes to. It's not the scene. They didn't put the scene in the game, but they mashed it together. Where she had that same dialogue, talking to Joel, like finding out about like the truth about him confirming like the truth about what he did. And I think them like mashing together that moment kind of shows me that they don't really understand the game as much as I wish they hoped they would, or they don't understand the story as much, because the Porsche moment comes or it comes like right after the last spoilers, I guess.
Spoilers for part 2.
Yeah, spoilers.
Go
the
ahead.
Porsche moment comes right after Santa Barbara, and she has her last battle with Abby.
Yeah.
And then she ends up letting her go, and it's like it's a moment of like, oh shit, this whole game is like about forgiveness,
Right, yeah.
Having that moment come right before the last episode where Abby comes in, and then we get our perspective switch. I feel like that lessens the impact of forgiveness a little bit more, because Abby just did what she did on screen, and now it's like, well, fuck this bitch, I don't care about forgiveness. I feel like if we spend more time with Abby, like as we did in the game, if we spend more time with Abby as we will in season 3, and then you drop the porch scene, it's like, oh, okay, now you know what I mean? It comes together, it blossoms a little bit more.
I see what you're saying. I think I will say, if there's any fans of the game still watching by the end of the show, I would say give them the benefit of the doubt, because I saw a theory, like I was just reading comments. I thought a theory that like said that they might actually do that scene still, at the end of the series, but either like you would have forgotten because it's been 2 seasons. The average show watcher, if every season takes 4 years, it will be 2 years, and it'll be 4 years since you saw that. So you most likely wouldn't remember that scene. So when it hits, you're like, oh shit, that's right, they had this conversation earlier. So they might be doing that way to get the same effect. But also they might even extend that scene, because the way it cuts, there could be more conversation after that. We see like Joel's face being like, oh shit, you're willing to try? Right? There might be more to the conversation. Similar to the trickery they played earlier in the season with Ellie walking past the porch. And you think, oh shit, they're not doing the porch scene? If you're a game watcher, you're like, what the fuck? She's supposed to go talk to him. But she goes back to the garage. But then she comes back out. I think there's still tricks they can do to accomplish similar things. So I would say give it the benefit of the doubt. But I understand what and there's so many complaints that I have personally about the season, like outside of me, even the game, but just like it's too short. HBO needs to stop with these 7 episode every 2 years bullshit. This needs to stop. If everything felt too rushed, like all that is true. So that's why I gave it like a 7 out of 10, because I also enjoyed it, but I could recognize its flaws. But I do think they're trying to do something. It's not like they're just fucking up for the sake of fucking up. I think they're trying to do something.
Yeah, and I'm not too far from you in giving it like a 6 out of 10. I think 10 episodes of this, would have helped it greatly. You know what I mean? 10 episodes. And then actually the idea that I saw online a little bit more is that we actually get maybe closer to like 18 episodes, and then you have like a mid-season break, kind of like how Invincible had, but not as long. You know?
Yeah. Right.
Perspective and stuff, and that works better than like waiting like 2 years
I agree.
for another season.
Very much so. But yeah. Okay. Listen, I don't think you're wrong at all. That's why I wanted to talk to you about it, because I think I see what everybody's saying. I think people are right. I think there's just another way to look at this season. But that was a good talk, Zay. Thank you so much, bro. That was a good talk. All right, bro.
Subscribe to me.
Yeah. High Tolerance on YouTube. Subscribe.
Potty mouth. Stop playing.
Well, hello, Potty Mouth.